Hello everyone and welcome to Indigenous Voice. Today is April the 18th, and in the first part of our program today we have with us not just a friend, also a brother, Virgil Sampson from the Tsartlip First Nation. And Virgil is going to talk about some special subject, important subject, the residential school, plus some update from Angel Simpson, who is now on a trip to Ottawa to talk about with the federal government about sort of settlement for the residential school. Hi Virgil, welcome to the show. Thanks again for being here. What do you have to say first about Angel trip to us?
Thank you, Mazen. First of all, I'd like to thank you and Indigenous Voice for having so many of our people on Indigenous Voice, talking about a lot of issues that are just not brought up in normal conversations, and using Indigenous Voice as a platform to voice our opinions and feelings and issues that are going across Canada and parts of the U.S., I would say. And I want to talk about the residential school, and what a lot of people don't know about is the Indian day schools too. And my sister Angel is back east with discussing about information about what we're going to do about settlements with the Indian day school. So I really can't say a whole lot right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that she'll come and do a follow-up interview to talk about mm-hmm. the information that she's getting at these meetings that she's at right now. Mm-hmm. But our people have been talking about this, and it's an ongoing topic that is so important yet nowadays, because apparently a lot of people are just so don't know about it, the residential school and the Indian day schools. And I'm glad that we can use Indigenous Voice to share information, experiences, and to help educate society and our own people of the realities of what happened in the schools, in the residential schools. The residential schools, our children were taken from their homes and had to go live in the schools for the most part of the year, and had very little contact with their families and communities. And the federal government, with a few of the church congregations, the United Church, and a few others, was to take the Indian out of the Indian, and take our children and teach them at a very young age how to, what they call, civilize the children, and to teach them Canadian ways. So a lot of the things that happened in the schools were very terrible, horrific, and very abusive. And thousands of the children that went there never came home. They died in one way or another in the residential schools. And those things never should have happened. And the reason why we do like to talk about these topics is because you hear a lot of people on social media that just don't believe that these things happen to our people, to our children in these schools. And it's very offending to a lot of us survivors that went through these experiences, that people are in such denial or just don't believe. So that's why I'm glad I'm here, is to talk about this, and hopefully help people find a direction in the spirit of like truth and reconciliation. Mm-hmm. But one of the other topics is the Indian day schools is where I went to. Me and my sister and brothers and cousins and other communities. What was different is the Indian day schools is we were allowed to go home at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and the churches were run by the nuns. We had professionals that would come into the schools like doctors, dentists, counselors, and different priests, but we experienced the horrors of what was going on in the residential schools too. We were physically abused, sexually abused, verbally abused, and in all different kinds of ways. My memory of being in the Tsartlip school where so many of us went is when we had to go there, it was very quiet in a very uncomfortable way. I remember having to go to the washroom, which we would have to ask and then we go. But as I walked through the halls, there was this very kind of an eerie silence that was in the hall. You couldn't hear nothing. There was no talking or anything. You could hear a pin drop. That's how quiet it was in the schools. And that's because there was a lot of fear, because the nuns were very abusive to us, and the professionals. My experience was with a doctor that I don't feel comfortable talking about it here, because it was very invading to me, and it traumatized me as a young boy of 6, what he did to me, and it wiped out a lot of my childhood memory of my experience of being at the school and parts of being at home, and just not knowing. So I feel really robbed of my childhood because of that experience of what that doctor did to me. And I remember going into that room, and I remember that doctor telling me to lift up my shirt and turn around, and then I had this very uncomfortable feeling, and then that's where my memory started getting blocked out. And I remember going into that room, but I don't remember leaving the room, and I don't know what happened for a lot of years after that because of that experience. So I felt really robbed of my childhood memories of being in that school, because schools are supposed to be a good experience of learning with family and friends and by your teachers, but these Indian day schools were just as bad, and if not worse, than the residential schools. And we were always intimidated that if we were saying anything to our parents, that your brother or your cousin was going to get it the next day if you talked about it. So we were manipulated in that way. And my sister gave me permission to share her story. My sister Angel, who's only a year older than me, she was physically abused a lot of the time of being in that school. She would have her ponytails yanked, and she was locked in the closet all day, and she'd end up peeing herself in the closet without having to have her lunch. And the nuns would grab her face and say, "These dimples aren't cute. You're not cute at all." So they're really humiliating to so many of us. Kids were having to lay on the floor face down like this during recess and lunch hours, and they had to lay there, and the rest of the kids had to walk by them. But there are so many other things, sexual things that were happening, the nuns were making the boys do, and I'm not at liberty to say who and all that, but for sure these things were going on. And so it all led up to a lot of the guys that, is, for me, I guess, I can only speak my story, is that I had a lot of, didn't trust women for a lot of years, and it was very, the women are so important in our communities. Our mothers are like the backbones of our families.
Good point.
And so we went from being abused by women in the schools, the nuns, and then going home to a loving mom and sisters and all that. But the ripple effects of both the residential schools and the Indian day schools are still in our communities. The Indian day school and the residential schools basically started around the same time in the late 1800s, and the effects of those are experiences, what the nuns and priests were doing, the professionals, the dentists, what they were doing and doing to us in these schools on a regular basis for a lot of years, because a lot of us started off in grade 1 at 6 and then aged up to 10, 12, 13, 14 and experienced all those abuses throughout those years, and all kinds of abuses, experiments, hunger experiments, electrical, and neglected of food, and all kinds of inhumane things that were done to us over the years. And so a lot of those boys and girls aged out of schools and came home to our communities and started inflicting these behaviors that was taught to them by the nuns and priests. And that's why we have a lot of the dysfunction in our communities of those abuses, because that's what they were taught as 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, right up until they aged out of school. And that's why a lot of us turn to alcohol and drugs, and so there's a lot of healing that has been going on, and a lot of healing that still needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm glad to share at least my story, and I have permission of my sister to share her story, because people really need to know these the abuses that were happening from survivors, and I'm really glad that I have this opportunity, as uncomfortable it is for me to talk about it and for people to hear about it. Those were the realities of these schools and what was going on, and the effects that are happening today in like the alcohol and drug abuse is still rippling through our communities. It's happening in all communities everywhere, white communities and all that too, but for what was done to us, because we're confined to, most of us are on reserves, and it all leads to why so many of our people are homeless, because of the abuses they experience of our older brothers and sisters and parents coming home with those taught behaviors that they learned in the schools. So children were getting abused at home, growing up, and then running from their families.
A cycle of abuse, what you mean. Now, Virgil, I want to know what kind of education they give. In spite of that, is stupid to ask and this horrific, but personally, why you think the whole process of residential school started? Yeah, you mentioned to take the so-called the Indian from the Indian, but why do you think? Just some people would think that is a very maybe stupid question, but when I hear talk from the officials or media about residential school or the whole issue of conciliation and truth, I never heard connecting the dot between residential school and the colonial process. It was happened In my view, and I would like to know if you agree or not, it was happened, I think, and as we know from history, just to make sure that the colonial occupation and control of this land is successful and cannot be done when you have Indian kids knowing their history and even the name of Indian, as you know. So, do you agree with me, or why do you think the whole process of a residential school happened in the first place?
Well, it was Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, that enforced that uh, in collaboration with the United Church and the Presbyterian and another one I can't think off the top of my head, but
Catholic Church.
the Catholic Church. And so the government and the churches collaborated to because they're the conquerors, and they've seen a lot of value in our resources across this continent, and they wanted to take over our lands and disconnect us from our way of life. They wanted to disconnect us of our language, our traditions, and so they could just take over. And that, I believe that's why they did that, is to do that, they had to disconnect us as young children and take us away from our family and community so that they could assimilate us into what Canadian society is now, and to teach us that rather than through our own traditions, our own laws that my older brother Tsartlip has been interviewed a few times with you, that about our laws that go back thousands and thousands of years. Our laws are about feelings. Our laws are about feelings not only about how we are towards each other as human beings, as brothers and sisters,
the surrounding.
but our laws are feelings about our connection and relationship to the land, the sea, and the air, and the different life forms that are in those. So our laws are about feelings, and so when these atrocities happened in these schools, it just totally went right against our laws, and it almost worked. Fortunately, we have elders in our community that are, I'm very fortunate that I have a brother like Tsartlip that has been sharing with you here on Indigenous Voice of all those topics, of our laws, our traditions. And that's what was one of the answers, is for a lot of us. For me, I've been sober almost 20 years now, and I turned to alcohol because of what happened to me in that Indian day school. And I had to turn towards my culture for healing. So I had to learn about who I was. My traditional name is Slanuktat, and I had to learn who that was, and about our traditions, our protocols, our laws, and find out who I am. So, and that's why it's always been hard for our people, is because we've had to live in two worlds. One in the white world of learning education and the educational system, but also learning and holding on to our own traditions, our own language, our own laws, our own protocols. So it's always been tough on our people to live in these worlds. And but that's what I did. I had to turn towards my culture to heal from the inside out of my experience of the Indian day school. But I also did modern counseling and therapy too, so I combined the both. So I learned a lot, and I found out why I drank, why I was violent, why I was dysfunctional, and so I'm really glad that I'm here today to even talk about these experiences, because I gave up that dysfunctional lifestyle.
Virgil, we have just a minute maybe left. You were mentioning some acknowledgement you want to say about the residential schools, some actual steps are being done lately. What do you?
Well, ever since the Truth and Reconciliation conferences have been happening, so many of us have been telling our stories like this. But there are efforts in society with some of the churches, the
The United Church, I
the
think.
Cadbury Bay United Church has been making efforts to reconcile with our people through healing circles and talking circles, and inviting different community members from different tribes to join in their circles and learn firsthand of our experiences, and they're looking for direction on how to reconcile. And I honestly believe that reconciliation has to come from our people. It's not going to come from the Prime Minister, and it's definitely not going to come from the Pope. It's got to come from us. We've already been told what to do and how to do and what not to do. But now, in the spirit of the Truth and Reconciliation, that has to come from us.
And that is really well said, Virgil. And I think we will be done with that, but I want to really thank you very much for sharing your story, personal story, and Angel story, who gave you permission to say it with us here in Indigenous Voice. Thank you again, and hopefully when Angel come back, we'll have more updated from here. Thanks for watching this part of Indigenous Voice. Hello everyone, and welcome to Indigenous Voice. Today is March 21st. First, I would like to say thanks to the volunteer and Shaw staff who make this show possible. In the first part, we have with us Elder Kolakwinsuk
Yes.
from the Tsawout First Nation. And I'm glad you correct me, Elder Kolakwinsuk.
Yes.
And we are going to talk about a project was done between PENDER Island and the Tsawout First Nation called the Youth Leadership
Project.
Elder Willard, why the project in the first place started?
It was started because some of the, our people were getting the injustice for our people were treated, and their land was taken away, and it's the youth, they were like 10 and 12 years old to
Reconnect?
Yeah, connect to the First Nations
Yes.
Teachings and education,
Uh-huh.
and to bring awareness to our our other colonization education and the First Nations education, and we're trying to get our bridge, the two bridges connecting to the First Nations education and their colonization education, and we're trying to establish something to reconnect and to the two educations
And to bring back the proper name for the land.
and
I saw that they learn about smoking salmon and about learning again, as you mentioned, the proper name for the land, like as you mentioned, the Bender Island called
Stayas.
So how the kids were reacting to that?
And this is one of the first part of, like you say, that is there another project coming up? I would like to see one, but I haven't heard of another one. I don't think there is another one, but this part of the education where they get to know about places in Pender Island and what the people used to do, and how they lived, how they picked the herbal medicines, how they they fished, how they collected the ducks and everything, and without the guns, they didn't need a gun for getting ducks, but they got ducks there, and they got the deer. They ran the deer off the cliffs, and they just harvested deer that way. And so, this is what the young children were learning about in their education, and in this part of the project.
Or let's call it a recolonization, the process of recolonization.
Yeah.
Which, you mentioned before the show that Elder Mavis Underwood has a big role in this project. In the beginning with Paul from PENDER.
Mavis and Paul, they were got their, and I guess the chief, Harvey Underwood, and they had this in, I don't know how long, previous years, but they mentioned it, and they decided to go ahead with the project. And then they put it together, and they finally put it together after a couple of years of,
It started in 2016, I
yeah,
think.
and then last year it happened, or last summer. And so I'm really proud to be a part of that, and that's, it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was really enjoyable. The kids were super, and the PENDER Island kids were super. And our own kids, they're really, grown up, sort of in that little time we had together, and we spent together, and we did a lot of traveling together and a lot of hiking together, and so there was, we did quite a bit in that short time, and it was very awesome.
It's started also in the clip. I noticed there is Earl Claxton Jr.
Yeah.
and John Bradley make kind of introduction about some. Would you please tell us about what?
It was one of the ways that the First Nations cook their food, and that one was just a short way of where we did. I don't know. We did salmon that way, and the clams, and this time we didn't have the seafood, but we had other food that we could see on the clip. But the next one we're going to have is the seafood, where we can have salmon, the clams, and all the seafood, and the school, PENDER Island School. And we had some of the parents come in, and some of the visitors come in to taste the food, and it shows on the clip what kind of food we had on the, and buried in the sand and underneath the fire. And they buried in, they had the seaweed and all the herbal stuff in there, and they put seaweed all over it, and they covered it up, and they baked it that way.
Great. I mean, one of the most wonderful thing I noticed in the clip, the memories of the kids of remembering the names, and the things, especially again about the names and the language, the new names they learn. Elder Willard, we are going to have to see this show, but we are out of time. But I hope we will have more chance in the future to come back and talk more about this project, hopefully with you and maybe Elder Mavis Underwood or Stephanie. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
I hope our viewers will learn also from this clip.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go.
This one was referred to as a journey song. Me and my friends will sing this whenever the canoes are leaving, when all our friends are going. And I'm hoping we can all learn it. Here I go on my journey across this nation. Must be on my way. Good friend, This mountain here, up on the summit, there are arbutus trees here. That's what the Sanish people tied the rope to and the canoes. And one day, Squataw came. He had a shaya in his mouth. It's a stick. That was a signal that there was going to be land appearing. That Saanich was emerging out of the water. They saw Bear Hill over here. So, but the biggest teaching we got from that story was that we have to treat everything with atoll, respect. Take only what you need, eat what you take, use what you take. Across this station must be on my way.
Like the houses are lifted or floating in the air, so that's how Tsawout got its name there. The Saanich had great respect for salmon, and they ate lots and lots of salmon every day. My dad said that once in a while they would have something different, and he said that he would watch his mother or his aunt when they were making supper, what they reached for, and he said it was salmon. So,
Open the day with a prayer. It's our ways to start our work in prayer. You know, just our ways, the way we do, the way we carry our lives, the way we carry ourselves.
So Heavenly Father, we just give you all the praise and all the thanks and all the glory. And we thank you for the wonderful children, all the leaders here in the circle, Lord, Heavenly Father. And we thank you for all the teachers and the elders, Lord. And we thank you for the one that's going to be preparing the pictures and the films. And we're just going to be asking for a beautiful day and outcome of the whole scenario here, there, Lord God. We just praise you, give you back all the glory and all the love that we have in this place. And we're going to be showing the leadership, and we're not going to be followers, Lord, Heavenly Father. And we just give you all the thanks. Praise God.
Lacha, Shalakwa, Asa Chuleta, Tlahatsan at Wasanich, Tsawout, the main is Tsartlip, the Tain, the Slashemia, the Sila, Sohuil, Tsawout. My English name is Romain. I'm from Tsawout, and my father was from Tsawout. And my mother was Joyce. She was from Paquetrin. And on my dad's side, my grandfather was Victor, and he's from Tsawout. And my grandmother, Tsawout, was born and raised in Paquetrin.
I'm Ben, and my full name is Benjamin, or you can call me Benny if you're wanting to make a joke at me, right? My dad was born in Enderby, and my mom was born in Quesnel, but my great grandparents lived on Armadale Road here on Stayas, and were one of the first families and settlers on the island of Stayas here, and he built chimneys, and you can still see his chimneys if you go up in the Port Washington area.
Hello, my name is Emily. The name that I carry is Tlala Kilokwa, and it means lady that sits among chiefs. My family comes from Seashelt and Alert Bay, and England and Germany. And I live here on PENDER with my family and 2 children.
Colonization name is Willard, and my First Nation's name is Kulakwansut. And Kulakwansut means to be raised to be a leader. But my grandfather was Pollock, that was his name, Philip Pelkey. He was one of the last runners, and before one of the last runners, that sent messages back and forth to the reservations or the communities. My mother was from Duncan, and my dad was from Tsawout. He was a fisherman, and today I like to fish, and I like to run, and I like to do a lot of stuff.
So Willard, would you be willing to share your story with us?
Yes. So my story is forgiveness, and when I went to the residential school, it was run by the missionaries and the priests, and a lot of them were pedophiles. So they sexually abused me when I was a young little, well, maybe younger than you, or maybe just as young. And I grew up. And I grew up hating for the way I was treated in the residential school. I was strapped, I was whipped, I was beaten. And, I was, and I didn't do nothing wrong. I figured I didn't do anything wrong, but, still I was being whipped and beaten and strapped. Just about every second day I was getting this harsh treatment and brutal treatment, and so I grew up like that, and I grew up and I had children. I had my own children, and I was really, unawares of love. And one day I adopted 2 girls into my life, Candace and Sybil. And Sybil used to I used to read stories. My wife said, go read the story to the children before bedtime. So I read stories to them. And right after the story reading, and those 2 little girls came rushing up to me and hugging me around their shoulders, and I used to push them away, and I said, don't ever touch me like that again, because I wasn't used to being hugged and touched. And so it took me a long time to read to them again, but I read to them again, and the same thing happened. They come and rushed and hugged me again, and I kept on pushing them away, get away from me. And read to them again, and they hugged me, and actually, these hugs were starting to feel, like they're melting me down. There's some kind of human being, So, I began to accept these hugs from my little children. And the Creator came to me and asked me if I wanted to forgive all those people that sexually abused me and strapped me and whipped me and beat me in the residential school, and the way other people treated me. And I said, no, I don't want to forgive anybody, because I grew up hard. And shortly after that, I lost my little girl, and Sybil, she died, and I was crushed. I was broken up to a million pieces and laying on the floor, shattered. And the only person that ever came up to me and hugged me was Sybil, and she passed away. And I was crushed, and I didn't know what to do with myself anymore. And the voice came to me, do you want to forgive all these people? No? And I looked around, and I said, yeah, I'll forgive all those people. So I forgave everybody. And there was like somebody came, kneeled down on the ground and picked all these people, all these pieces, and formed together again, and formed me, and put me all back together again. And here I am, and wherever I can hug a lot of people because of those hugs I got from my little girl. And she came up and hugged me, and it feels good to be alive, to be a human being, and to, show a lot of leadership that, from where we have been, and to where we are going now, to all the young kids, I can, be a leader and not.
Here I go on my journey across this nation. Must be on my way.
Yeah, you gotta do this. Tighten it. Oh, there you go.
Sounded like elephant.
Yeah! Do it again. You'll only get better. You wanna try it, Kat? Go for it, Kimberly. There's no harm. Oh, you gotta try this again. Yes! I don't know. You can do it.
Let's go.
something to Moscow. Try it. It's okay to mess up.
I don't know why, but whenever I go, I sound like a bear.
Do it.
Like,
Okay. No, I can't do it. I'll do it. Oh. Wicked, you got it.
oh no. Sounds like a bear.
Tighter lip. Yeah.
I think we're getting. Okay.
See if you're paying attention.
There's one right there. Manila.
There was one buried in here that I kept watching.
Right here.
Yay!
No, it's bigger.
Oh, it's so pretty. I have a book back. These things are so cool. Ripley, look at this shell.
Is that one right there?
That one's a problem. Or the one next to it.
Yeah, that one.
How do we know which kind we're looking for?
Did you guys find any?
Yeah, they found a lot.
Did they? Sweet.
Right here, we joined these two fossil shells into his scope. And we turned them into a smile. And so you look at these two, you could see the two ears. Yeah. So you can see their two ears in there.
Pretty much every week we did a different trip. And what was the best trip in your mind? Like what sticks out in your mind?
I like going to the beach by the bridge.
Beach by the bridge.
Either the canoeing or Goldstream.
Okay, you're the first person to talk about Goldstream. Tell me about Goldstream.
What do you mean?
What did you like about it? What did we do?
It was fun walking through the water and stuff.
What did we do on that trip? Remind me.
We looked at Sam.
We looked.
Special to be going up the mountain and hearing all those stories and just having that nice view of all the place.
Do you remember any of the stories that you heard on the top of the mountain?
The one about not wasting the fish. You would have to use all of the fish, and then with the skeleton you would put it back into the water where it came from.
Yeah, that was crazy.
On Pender, when we went down to that beach, that was really nice.
Like down by the bridge?
Yeah.
Why? What was cool about
I
that?
don't know, it was just like, we don't usually get to go down there. The water was really nice and clear.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Do you remember seeing the middens there?
Yes.
The big shells?
Yeah.
Trip. You're
To Goldstream when we got to see all the salmon in the water.
cool. It was cold that day.
It was really cold, but it was really fun.
Going on that hike up the mountain,
Yeah.
but it was hard.
It was hard, remember? Yeah. What did you like? What did you take pictures of that stuck out in your mind?
I took pictures of the view from kind of the edge, but not quite.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't fall off.
Canoeing.
Canoeing. Cool. How come?
I really like canoeing, and especially canoeing over towards the island that we went to.
Yeah, right on. Do you remember what we did when we got there?
We ate sushi and Romaine and Willard told stories.
What stories stuck out to you on this youth leadership project? Do you remember?
Like out of
Sure, yeah.
I really like the Titan story and the Raven story.
The Raven story, cool. What lessons from those stories, why did they stick out, like the Titan story? Why did you like that?
I don't know, I just like to look up at trees and see how, like, you can actually kind of see the arms.
Cool, man. What about any other, when we went to Tsawout, what did you think about those trips?
Those were really fun. I like the mountain ones.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't raining.
Yeah.
What did you like about going up and up?
Well, it was really fun in how we learned about the trees shedding the leaves to let other trees grow.
Yes, what trip on Staias? Did you like the canoe or the walk to the bridge?
I liked the canoeing.
Yeah.
The canoeing was really fun, and we got to hear the songs over the water.
Ooh.
Interesting. Probably learning how to like do that pit cook.
How to do the pit cook?
Yeah.
What did you like about the pit cook?
All the steam that came out.
Yeah, John Bradley, he did a good job of explaining that. What did you think of the food that day?
Good.
Yeah, what did you eat? Do you remember what we ate?
Yeah, we ate fish and vegetables.
Yeah, it was really good. Remember we had the deer stew? You don't remember that? It was like a stew with the rice. It was really good.
that was good.
That was good. That was the deer.
I think one of the most memorable times in a bad way was probably getting very cold at Goldstream.
Yes.
I was very wet and cold.
Yeah, but you crossed that river. You were brave. You did that day.
With Kimberly on my back.
Kimberly was on your
Yeah,
back?
Kimberly was on my back. I've learned lots of new words that
Yeah.
I forget.
Like from the Sinchothan language?
I learned the Sinchothan word for bumblebee, but I forgot it.
The Sinchothan word for bumblebee?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what that is either.
Yeah.
Did you remember, like, what about the word for Pender?
Pender is Staias.
Yeah.
With a D, not a T.
With a D, not a T. That's right.
Staias.
Yeah, for sure. And what did you notice about anything in Willard's story in particular that stuck out with you?
It was very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone and we've learned stories about the salmon and on the mountains we learned stories, and then we came here and we did some stuff. And we made the sweaters and we learned a bunch of words from their language.
Cool. Yeah, you think 5 years from now.
5 years.
Yeah, what will stick out in your mind, do you think?
Being able to do this and knowing all the people involved in it.
Should we just try it?
And do you think you did any friends that you met from this project? Like, was anybody that you really got along with?
Kind of got along with everyone.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome, Priscilla. Thank you. Have you met any new friends like here from Staias? Like, who have you been hanging out with?
I've been hanging out with Isaac and Ada and all of the Pender.
Yeah, cool. And had you ever been to Pender before?
You can't be there because it's
No.
Never been here. Cool, man. Now, what sticks out in your mind? Like, because we went to...
Just coming here and like as soon as I walk in, everybody is like so friendly and they say, "Oh hi, Lutheran," bunch of other.
Cool. And what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a blacksmith.
A blacksmith. That's cool. So I gotta say, you showed incredible leadership on this project. Incredible. You were awesome. And I really noticed you. I was really proud of like some of the leadership skills you showed on this trip. You showed some really. You were always listening, and you were always respectful. And I just want to tell you how appreciative I was of that. That was really cool of you, Abby. And you remember you gave us a tour of the village. Remember that second day? We drove around the van. Do you remember that? You're like, that's my house. Yeah. Like, because you live, your village, you live by a lot of your relatives, right? Yeah. Cool. Awesome, Abby. Well, thanks. Thanks for being a part of the project. It's really fun.